Hey everybody! Today we're going to talk about how to conquer style bleeding with the CSS Chaos add-on. My name's Alex Wilson and I'm the lead engineer of the Beacon design system at T. Rowe Price. So what is style bleeding? Well, style bleeding refers to the situation where you try to apply styles to one element, but they end up getting applied to other elements on the page in a way that's a bit unexpected. And this can happen when styling gets applied to the element selector itself, kind of like what we see in our button example at the top right. That button styling will get applied to all buttons on the page unless there's other classes that have a higher level of specificity. Second is when class selectors are just too generic, and we can see that in our second example where we're using two .btn classes with different properties. Well, those properties are going to clash with one another when actually applied to the element. And then finally, the use of inheritable styles can certainly introduce style bleeding issues. Inheritable styling is a feature of CSS, and we should use it when it makes sense to do so. But if we're trying to lock down the styles within our components, it may not be the best time to use them. So what's the overall impact? Well, first we have brand inconsistency. We want to make sure that the components that we're building within our component library and we're seeing in Storybook look the same way there as they do within the application when the users are actually interacting with the site. And that's not always the case, especially when style bleeding is involved. Second is that we can introduce accessibility failures, dealing with contrast, font sizing, and layout, among others, that could result in a poor experience for any user, but especially those that have short and long-term disabilities. And finally, we have the maintenance cost that's associated with it all. If we're working to fix those style issues, we have to sift through all the different style sheets and make sure we're only changing the styles that we need to change to fix the issue and not impact the rest of the site. So hasn't this already been solved, you might be wondering? Well, there are some workarounds that include using naming conventions such as BEM, block element modifier. This is a very common tactic to help avoid class property merging. You could also use browser APIs. I always suggest using what the web has to offer, and the Shadow DOM is a really promising technology that allows you to scope CSS to a specific element's implementation. It's been widely adopted by web component users, but it can also be used without web components. And finally, we can introduce JavaScript, such as the CSS and JS library, which applies generated class names to HTML elements. However, some of these libraries have shown to reduce performance, so it would be worth weighing your options there, weighing the pros and cons. None of these methods, however, help reduce inheritable styling issues and impact properties like color, font size, weight, border sizing, and many more. And that's why we need to introduce the CSS Chaos add-on to do some of that testing for us. A little bit about the add-on. You can easily set inheritable styles through the add-on view, where we have the property name, a description of the property, and a drop-down of different values that you can use to apply around the component that you're building. And once you're applying those styles, you can actually see the issues that come up within an application before it hits the end user. Second, we have the ability to randomize those values. So if you don't want to click through and manually change them, you can click the randomize button as many times as you want just to make sure that your component is hardened enough. And if you find one and miss one, you have the ability to go back and go through the history and find that configuration that caused all of those problems. Once you have that configuration, you can copy the applied styling out into your Jira ticket, your Rally ticket if you're looking to tackle it later, or if you're looking to tackle it now, you can copy it into your code editor. So let's see an example. All right, so here we have our masthead or our header. We've got our logo to the left, we've got the company text there, and we've got our login and sign up process starting to the right. All right, so this looks pretty good. So it's ready to ship, right? Well, let's take a moment and take a look at our application context. So if we were to pull it into an application, we can see here that there are some styles that are overriding our header. So we could go in and inspect this, but let's just go back to our component and see if we can find it out another way. Well, let's bring in the CSS Chaos tester, and we know that we have a color problem. So while we do have all of these options here, let's just focus on color for the moment. It's currently using the inherit property, but if we change it to red, then we can see the exact same issue we were seeing in the application. All right, so if we take a look at that and inspect, we can see that our header content doesn't actually define a color, which is our main issue. And we can see that the color is being applied here. It's not crossed off because nothing's overriding it. So that's what's bleeding into our header component. Okay, so let's go over to our VS Code editor. if we go in and change the color to the original color, which was black, and click Save, we can see that the color is coming through now as it should. We can also see that the class here now has that color property. If we scroll down, we can see that the color is crossed out, meaning that it's been overridden by something within our styles. If we go to the application page, we can see that the company title now uses the right color, and we've secured those styles. The component is now more hardened than it was before, but I suspect there might be some other issues. So if we go to the randomize button, we can click that, and sure enough, there are more issues to solve. We're not going to solve them all today, so we're going to go back to our history view where I've done some more testing before, but if we want to go back to one that we had, we can copy the CSS out and we can bring it into our VS Code or another ticket, and we can copy that in and save it for later. All right, let's go back to the installation directions. To install the package, you need to run npm install CSS Chaos Addon -- save dev. That enables us to save it to our dev dependencies rather than our bundle dependencies. Next, we need to include our add-on, and this is the same way that you'd include any other add-on. We need to add our namespace to the add-ons array, and that namespace is set to CSS Chaos Addon. Once we have that, we can get up and running. But if we wanted to update the configuration, we do have the options to do so. So we can set the max variance, which allows us to set the number of items that can be randomized by the randomize button. And here on the right, we have it set to 5. We also have the ability to show or hide the history. We can change that value from true to false through the properties. And we can also update the property data that can be shown in the add-on view. We can add or remove properties, set the default values, or even introduce drop-down options for a specified property. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope this gave a brief overview of the CSS Chaos add-on and how you can use it to avoid style bleeding issues. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out on Twitter, Mastodon, or over email by using these links. Have a good one.